Yeah, hello and welcome to today's webinar, Insights into Digital Advertising for 2023. My name is Ricky Bruslani. I'm the Senior Director here at AUDIENCEX. I just want to thank you for all taking a bit of your time to join us today. I'm going to give this a couple more minutes to let people join us. And while I do, I'll go over a couple of logistic items here. So first, we will indeed be sending a recording of this webinar to all the registrants afterwards, so everyone can keep a lookout for that soon. Additionally, we'll be taking some time to answer any questions that you may have at the end of today's presentation. So if you do have any, you can go ahead and submit it at any time at the Zoom's Q&A feature at the bottom of their interface. We'll have some poll questions as well during our conversation. I will be your host moderating our roundtable discussion. So today we'll talk about the current state of digital advertising landscape, share the challenges and opportunities we anticipate seeing in the near future, and consider how brands and agencies can best position themselves to remain adaptable to anything that this year may bring. So for today's agenda, I'm just going to start off with introduction and then move into our roundtable discussion, and then at the end, our Q&A section. So here to guide us through a bit of that today, I am pleased to introduce our experts from AUDIENCEX, Stephen Kaufman, who is our VP of Client Services, Brittany Ray, who is VP of Product, and Keith Montia, who is the Director of Search and Social. Stephen, Brittany, and Keith, thank you so much for being here today and joining in this discussion. I know it's going to be great. Before diving into our conversation, if you can briefly introduce yourselves, including your role and background. So we'll start off with you here, Stephen.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. This is Stephen Kaufman. As Ricky said, I lead our client services team here at AUDIENCEX. So my team and I are the ones on the front lines dealing with clients on a day-to-day basis, hearing what they're seeing in the marketplace and making sure that we're meeting their needs. My background goes back a bit to almost the beginning of the internet. I've been buying banners, text links, etc. Way back when, through to the rise of search and now the rise of programmatic and everything data-driven. So really excited to be here.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Brittany? You're on mute there, Brittany.
I was going to do that. Thanks, Ricky. I'm happy to be here as well. As Ricky mentioned, I'm Brittany Ray, VP of Product at AUDIENCEX. I oversee our internal operating tools as well as our self-service DSP Admatics. I've been with AUDIENCEX for 4.5 years now. In fact, I think this picture up here is from me 4.5 years ago. I've been in marketing and media for about 14 years. Prior to AUDIENCEX, I was at a video-centric DSP, Videology, where I oversaw the West Coast operations. And before that, I was at a print production company on their technology solutions and database team.
Great, thanks, Brittany. Keith?
Hi, everybody. My name's Keith. I'm the Director of Search and Social for both paid and organic at AUDIENCEX. A little bit of background. I come from a large agency background. I've worked with all types of businesses, from newly launching small, medium-sized businesses to large global enterprise. And here I lead the team on social strategy, testing, analysis, and of course, execution for any of our client needs.
Great, thank you, Keith. So we'll go ahead and get started on our roundtable discussion. So first question up here is, what do you think will be some of the biggest areas of concern for marketers this year? We'll go ahead and get started with you, Stephen.
Yeah, well, I think the easy answer to that question, which since I get to go first, I'll take the easy way out, is the economy, right? So are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? Are we heading for a recession? What's all that going to look like? And then for our clients, from their perspective, what does that mean? The marketing budgets stay intact? Do marketing budgets get cut? What's consumer behavior going to look like? Are people going to keep spending the way that they've been spending? So just a lot of uncertainty heading into the year, and how it's all going to shake out.
It's funny you said you were taking the easy one, Stephen, because I think mine is the layup here. I was going to go with just navigating the complex data privacy regulations. They're just constantly changing, and there's no comprehensive federal law. So these laws are regionally specific, which means in a virtual world, the strictest regulation is going to rule. There's also regulations around types of data like health. There's regulations around populations like children. So I think, just keeping up with your privacy policies and regularly reviewing them and making sure that you're being responsible with your users' data. I think that that's going to be a major concern in 2023.
And speaking to social, actually kind of rolling off of what you were just saying, Brittany, I think the data privacy issues are really going to be prevalent across the board this year. But for social specifically, given all of that information and knowing that we're potentially leading into a recession, I think for social specifically, one of the biggest challenges this year is going to be reaching relevant audiences in a way that really allows for learning and analysis and insight. For the most part, platforms are moving much towards like a broader reaching a broad audience instead of granular targeting. They want you to use auto placements and lean into automation as much as possible. And a lot of times that doesn't allow for as much insight as you would hope. So I think from my perspective, that's going to be a big challenge for advertisers really trying to learn and drive action and movement.
Great, thanks, Ryan. So we're going to go ahead and launch our first audience poll. So this one is on the topic of marketing budgets. So you should see it on your screen shortly. So I'll go ahead and just read the question here. What are your expectations for your budget this year? Increase, ad spend, decrease, stay the same, or not yet certain? So if you can put in your input here, that'll be much appreciated. The idea here, we'll go ahead and run a few of these polls, and then towards the end in our Q&A section, we'll look at the results and have a discussion around it. So in the meantime, I'll go ahead and start the next question here while you're inputting that poll. What kind of impact do you anticipate continued economic concern having on budgets and preferred tactics or metrics?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think flat is the new growth in times like this. Which some people might not like to hear, but I think just because of the uncertainty, there's going to have to be a lot of flexibility in the marketplace. Budgets are going to be in flux throughout the year. I think the e-commerce type retailers who can attach an ROI to their spend will obviously be in better shape. There could be continued growth there as the business dictates. We have clients that will spend as long as it's sufficient to keep spending, and I expect that to be the case. But other than that, I think flexibility will be key.
Yeah, I'll kind of second a little bit of that. I think it's all going to come down to improving the bottom line. So, marketers are likely going to have an increased focus on return on investment, kind of like Stephen said, lean more on results-driven metrics like CPA and ROAS. They'll probably also focus on tactics that have a proven track record and hold off on any experimental spending. And then there's also probably going to be a greater focus on cost savings, so using things like brand safety measures to ensure reduced waste.
Yeah, I'm aligned with really just more of a focus on performance-based media. So a lot of cutting back on just general awareness, non-performing platforms specifically when you're running a really large or cross-platform execution. Campaigns with soft goals, like a lot of those, I think are just going to start paring down more and more. And we've seen that with the clients that we're working with more of an emphasis on budget to actually drive results. And I also think organic has a chance to shine on this, where budgets potentially are loosening or getting a little tighter, and people are looking to drive more performance-based media. Organic, I think, could see a little bit of an uptick in businesses using organic as the testing space in a way to reach users. Obviously not at the same scale, but I could see that being an opportunity for this year as well.
One thing I'll add, because you mentioned performance, Keith, I think there's also going to be a greater emphasis on data-driven marketing, because obviously with tighter budgets, marketers are going to need to make sure that they're spending their money where they should and how they should. And so they're going to need data to do that.
Great, thank you. Next question is, as user privacy continues to be a concern, what steps can marketers take to inspire trust in their audiences?
I could take this one. For social, I think this one's very important. It's really just having a level of transparency and providing clarity when asking a user to take a specific action. Like if you're asking someone to sign up for a newsletter or you're asking for their data, making sure that you're being very upfront letting that user know that their information isn't going to be sold for marketing purposes or for anything other than what you're asking for. And even for like product service offerings, being upfront about what the value prop is and what the users are going to get in terms of how much it costs, what's included. I think as much as you can be upfront, users and potential customers online will be, have a lot more trust in the brand without feeling like they're being baited and switched.
Yeah, I'll second what Keith said. I think it's all about transparency. So, if you think about just you as a person, right, we're coming to expect privacy controls as the norm, right? And so kind of to what Keith was saying, marketers, they don't want to try to hide behind, confusing or lengthy disclosures. Be upfront, be clear, be concise. I would also say use an opt-in approach to your data rather than an opt-out approach. So those are just some of the steps around transparency, as I would agree with Keith. I think another way marketers could inspire trust is provide value with the data that they're collecting, right? So don't just use data to benefit you as the marketer, but show that it's being used to bring value to your audience as well, right? I want to know that if I'm going to consent to give my data, that at the end of the day, it's going to benefit me as well.
Yeah, I think, you've got to comply with GDPR and CCPA, right? Those are kind of table stakes. And then, yeah, I think I agree with what Brittany and Keith were saying about, adding value to that. I like to say, don't be creepy, be relevant, right? So, don't be creepy in the way that you're using the data and follow people around, be relevant to provide added value.
Yeah, I think you have to think about the long game when it comes to that too, because it's obviously really easy to try and bait and switch someone or get someone to just buy something right off the bat. But you need to think long-term longevity, getting consumers to come back. If they're going to purchase from you once, are they going to do it again? And the more consumer trust you have, the more likely they are to be a repeat buyer.
Great point.
Got it. Great. So let's go ahead and launch our second poll of the day here. So you'll see this pop on your screen. It's surrounding zero and first-party data. So with that, okay. So the question here is, what tactics are you currently using to collect zero-party and first-party data? First-party cookies, incentivization, quizzes, polls, surveys, social media polls, gated content, and others. If you take some time and put in your input here, once again, we'll go ahead and review the results and have a discussion around it in our Q&A.
So I want to give a quick definition of zero-party data. I'm not sure everybody's going to be familiar with that term.
I was gonna mention that actually, and I think we're going to touch on this, or I plan to at least. But first-party data is considered data that you own as a business or an advertiser that you're collecting, either collecting emails or from purchase information. Zero-party data is a relatively new term, but that's when customers or individuals will actually raise their hand and elect to provide their information to a business or service in exchange for some kind of good. It could be savings, it could be access to a tool or a technology. So it's relatively new, but just for clarity for anybody who's not familiar.
Great. Thank you, Keith. So we'll roll into our next question here. What are some tools and tactics that marketers can use to reach their audiences given privacy concerns?
I can jump on this one. I think one option that's been around for a while, but it's kind of taken a backseat until recently, is contextual. So, for those of you who don't know, contextual targets users based on the content of the website or app that they're currently on. What I think is pretty cool about contextual is that it's relevant to the user in the exact moment that you serve them the ad, right? I have an 11-month-old, and if I'm on a web page that's talking about what I should feed my 11-month-old, and I get an ad that's for Yummy or Tiny Organics, this is baby food, that's relevant to me in that exact moment, right? And that didn't use any personal data to target me, but very relevant. Now, if I'm on a webpage talking about the latest digital advertising trends, I'm probably more likely to ignore that ad, even though behaviorally I am the perfect person to get that ad. So I think that's really cool about contextual, is it's something that, like I said, it's been around for a while, but we're really starting to see it pick back up again because of the privacy concerns. One thing about contextual, I would say, like I said, it's been around for a while. And at this point, contextual providers are pretty much expected to be semantic in nature, right? So if you're going to target using the keyword Jaguar, contextual partners understand the difference between Jaguar the animal and Jaguar the car. That's become expected, but what we're seeing now with the resurgence of contextual is more and more partners are doing things with sentiment and theme and tone of the content rather than just a specific keyword. So context and contextual is my answer there.
And that kind of helps bring in what Stephen was saying too, make it relevant and not creepy. It can make a huge difference in how that comes off to users. And I mean, for search and social, and I know I just mentioned the zero-party data, I think that's a huge opportunity for businesses. It's not going to make sense for everyone. It just depends on what kind of partners you can find that have access to zero-party data and what those audiences are like. But I think one of the best and most valuable things for businesses is leveraging their first-party data. If you have a database of who all your customers are, you can use that to model or scale it up on a platform like Facebook, Instagram, or Snapchat, Twitter, really any of that, without interfering or really getting deep into like user data. It will just identify and find and reach users that are very similar to your existing customer base. So I think that should really be one of the first areas that businesses should approach.
Yeah, I think I would agree with all that. In the short term, I don't see significant change coming for the privacy space, but it is going to happen, right? We know that Google is going to deprecate third-party cookies at some point, right? And privacy concerns are just going to continue to grow. So I would say keep doing what you're doing, keep being compliant, and then start to lean in on some of the things that Brittany and Keith are talking about and other things out there, because you're going to need to be prepared for the day when some of the ways we're targeting now are going to get shut off or become less effective. So let's start getting the lessons now for how we move forward.
Great, thank you. Next question here. Do you anticipate that the role of automation and machine learning will continue to grow in marketing this year? And how can marketers adapt to ensure that role remains balanced?
I can jump on this one as well. I would say absolutely. I think it's going to grow. Automation and machine learning, it's what's really going to allow marketers to do more with less resources. I know we talked about tighter budgets, but there's also smaller teams, right? So this is going to allow marketers to automate repetitive tasks, also use automation to analyze data to make informed decisions quicker. So I do think it'll definitely grow. I think the balance question is a very important one. I would say marketers don't want to neglect the important aspects of marketing that need a human touch, like creativity. Marketers should definitely still be involved in the process, reviewing and interpreting data, making final decisions. I was listening to my news podcast this morning, and they were talking about CNET. I'm not sure if you guys on the call or any of the audience is aware, but CNET was using AI to write some of their content, and they're kind of in hot water right now because the content they were putting out, they found it had a lot of mistakes. It also had plagiarism in it. So that's just one very relevant example of how marketers need to be reviewing this stuff, even though they should continue to use automation and machine learning, but definitely review it. To take a step back, I do think it's worth mentioning a couple of reasons why I think balance is important with automation and machine learning. So there's the aspect of it about explainability, right? Explaining what the AI or the machine learning has done. This can be really difficult because these AIs are using so many more data points than the human brain can conceptually understand, right? That's the whole reason behind them. So it can be very hard to explain what an AI has done or what machine learning has learned, and that can make it kind of hard to trust. So I think that's one reason that you should have that balance. And then the other reason is the ethical issues that arise with it. So think biases. Algorithms can perpetuate and even amplify biases that exist in the data that's used to train them. And then there's also privacy. So these things need a lot of data to work, and with lots of data comes concerns about privacy. So I think those are just two things that marketers should be mindful of when it comes to this conversation.
Yeah, I think you actually mentioned something that's really relevant and something that comes up a lot. I think automation and kind of machine learning can be scary for a lot of people, and they just think like, all right, well, what am I going to do? Or, it just kind of has a negative tone to it. I think it's really great. There are some instances where it can be challenging, like you mentioned. Things like Performance Max in Google, it's like fully automated. So you have very little visibility into what's happening, what levers are being pulled. But I think a way to kind of counteract that, like you're saying, having that human touch, lean in. I mean, those tools, you don't really even have an option to not use them or to do anything different. But I think having a balance is taking the time and reinvesting that time that you would have otherwise spent optimizing or executing and taking the time to do some deeper analysis on what's happening so you get better insights. And even just doing the background of trying to understand when automation and machine learning is taking over, how those tools or algorithms are working. So at least that you have, a full understanding of what's happening in the background. And a lot of that information is available online. And if not available online, you could always try and reach out to reps for a specific platform who will hopefully be able to give you more information on that too.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's lazy tech and there's strategic tech, right? So from the automation standpoint, so from a lazy standpoint, right, you can have the automation write your copy, you can have it build your website, but you don't know what you're going to get, right? And there could be copyright issues and other things. The strategic use would be using dynamic creative optimization to serve the right ad to the right person in real time without having to have a creative team develop literally thousands and thousands of ads. Now, from a labor standpoint, somebody still has to create that template. Somebody has to proof it. Somebody has to make sure that everything that's going into it is in line, right? So I don't know too many tools that are set it and forget it. Right. And if you think about programmatic, and when programmatic sort of became a thing in media, it was going to be everybody in media is going to be out of a job because programmatics, right? All media buys are going to be done by machines. Well, it actually created a whole new kind of jobs, right? And a whole new industry. Think about the Trade Desk and what they've done from a revenue standpoint. So, it's actually launched a whole new industry versus killed an industry. So, I think automation will continue to go in that way, and you're always going to need people to run the machines.
Great, thank you. Next question here. How challenging is it for a small or mid-market brand or agency to effectively use the latest tech?
Yeah, I can hop in here. I think this one's very relevant for me because most of my clients are smaller mid-market brands and agencies. I think unless a business is going to work with a partner like AUDIENCEX to manage the use of these technologies, it's undoubtedly difficult for them not only to use the latest technologies, but also just get access to them. There's, often high minimums, lengthy contracts, and these techs are they're very complicated. They can be very hard to really grasp. And so it requires specialized skills, which can be difficult for small organizations to acquire and even afford. So SMBs, smaller organizations, I think they need to be looking at technology that's built with them in mind. At AUDIENCEX, as I mentioned, I oversee our Admatics, our self-service DSP. We recently launched this DSP specifically to combat these blockers. It's a no minimum DSP. It sits on top of an industry-leading platform, and it has a simplified UI. So it gives access to these smaller organizations. It removes that barrier. It gives them access to, these integrations, these partnerships, this enterprise technology, but it doesn't require them to invest as much time and resources into learning and using these types of technologies.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of ways that the small to mid-market brands can go. One would be, like Brittany said, leaning in on technology that's built specifically for them, like Admatics. Another option is on a vertical basis. If there's a piece of tech that's built specifically for like .edu, for example, education marketers, small and large education marketers will probably be able to lean in on that. It'll probably be available at a vertical level, right? And the other option is to work with somebody like AUDIENCEX, where we're able to aggregate the scale that we have across a number of small to mid-sized clients in order to be able to get access to some of the closed betas that are out there, because individual clients won't have the spend necessary to meet the minimums, but a company like AUDIENCEX can. So, that's a service that we provide for our clients on an ongoing basis.
I'd say, like, from my perspective, I don't necessarily think, I think programmatic's a lot more complicated. I don't think like search and social is as challenging, or leaning into the newer technology is as challenging as it more is overwhelming. Just given, like, there's so many different platforms, so many requirements and limitations on how to maximize your opportunity, and they're going to vary by platform. So I would say with regard to that, honestly, YouTube is a really invaluable resource for getting some information and kind of getting your foot in the door for some of these platforms, because it's really not super challenging. So I would say use those resources, and honestly, when in doubt, just leverage industry experts like us, and we can ensure that your dollars are being maximized and can point you in the right direction.
One thing I'll add that relates to that, because you mentioned search and social platforms, it isn't just about even the platforms or the DSPs themselves for delivering the ads. It's also about the platform that you use to onboard your first party data, or the platform you use to visualize your data or to analyze it. And so, which, relates to programmatic and search and social. And so I think an important thing is also making sure that the partners that you're working with, if you are to go work with a partner, have access to these additional partnerships that you can leverage without having to pay, like I said, those high minimums and sign those lengthy contracts.
Great, thank you. So this brings us to our third and final poll question. So you should be seeing that pop up on your screen shortly. It's surrounding the current programmatic advertising approach here. So programmatic access, how do you currently advertise programmatically? So there's 4 choices there. If you can go ahead and fill those in. And in the meantime, we'll go ahead and jump to our next question. Here is what formats, channels, or platforms do you expect to be particularly hot this year?
I can jump on this one for search and social. I mean, I think we're already seeing Reels, AR, VR formats. Honestly, even some trending audio on social are new ad types and things that are becoming particularly hot, especially as they're more widely adopted. And we actually touched upon this in one of the last webinars that we had done as well, but just new ad types, ones that aren't even out yet, and particularly for social platforms that are algorithm based. When you get a new way of reaching or engaging with users, those are generally put to the front of like organic user experience, because the platforms want to understand, are users going to engage and adopt this kind of technology? So I would say, whatever the new technology is that we're not even discussing now, like jump on it as best as you can. Try and be an early adopter.
From my perspective, I think audio is going to grow. I saw a stat on Forbes that 54% of New Yorkers are going to return to work this month, January 2023. And by return to work, I mean return in person. And so, with that comes more people commuting, and I think more people will be listening to podcasts and radio as they commute. So yeah, I think audio will grow, and alongside audio or as part of audio, this might be a wild card, but I think voice assistant advertising could become hot this year. I know I counted the other day. I live in like 1,000 square foot home, and we have 7 voice assistants in my home, and that doesn't include my husband and my cell phone. I don't even think we have 7 distinct rooms in my house. So yeah, I think people are just using voice assistants more and more, and I think advertising will follow as it does.
Yeah, I think CTV will continue to expand this year. The eyeballs are migrating online onto connected devices. I think the combination of granular data targeting with the big screen connected TV environment with granular measurement on the other side is going to be really enticing for advertisers. So I see more and more continuing to push that way.
Great, thank you. Next question. How much attention do you think marketers need to be giving the metaverse at this point?
Jump in here. So the metaverse is really cool. If you haven't put on the goggles and experienced it, I encourage everybody to give it a shot. It's pretty cool. From a brand perspective, I'm not sure it's quite there yet. I think it's relevant for specific kinds of brands. So travel and tourism, for example, right? If I could put on the goggles and go and experience a resort before I actually, commit to book there, and could walk around it and experience it in the 3D experience that I'm seeing, and what are the beaches like, and what are the rooms like, and what are the restaurants like, cruise ships, things like that. I think there could be some interesting tie-ins to those brands, but it's going to be brand by brand. It's going to be difficult to prove out a monetization model for it, along with measurement. So, I think it's not the first place I would look to expand with my dollars, but I think on a case-by-case basis, it could be interesting.
Stephen, you just said something that made me think, every time I go into a new sub shop or any kind of store, I get this like anxiety of, okay, where do I go? Where do I order? Where do I pick up? So I think you saying that made me think that could even be a great area for use there. But in terms of the question, I think, be aware of the potential it holds, but don't invest heavily in it yet. I mentioned the privacy regulations around programmatic and advertising and data. If you think about that and where we've come today with that, just think about how much more it's going to be with the metaverse. It's going to be expected to be very heavily regulated, and that's going to change a lot before it becomes stable, if ever. So that's just one thing to consider if you are thinking about the metaverse.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Like, keep an eye on what's happening, but I agree. I don't necessarily think it's worth diving in yet, just given the high cost of entry, high investment if you're trying to have a presence in the metaverse, and even a high investment to get VR or AR goggles, depending on where you're getting them from. But yeah, I think it's important to understand how it's being used by their advertisers, and unless you have like giant budgets where you can afford to really dive in and be one of those one of the first people in there, it would be very valuable to understand how things are working, so that when it is time to activate, if and when it is time to activate, you know exactly where to go.
Great, thank you. Next question here. What kind of potential do you think there is for brands in AR or VR?
I can jump in on this one. I think, at least from my perspective, it still seems very, very limited, or fairly limited, at least from my perspective. Really just specific verticals where it's increasingly valuable. Like having those virtual try-on experiences, I think are really great for a lot of makeup brands or sunglass brands, eyeglass brands. It doesn't work for all industries. I think there's a lot of pieces of AR and VR that are a little glitchy, but where it performs well, I think there is opportunity there. But I think it's only going to continue to grow. I mean, this year we've got new AR and VR hardware coming out with PS5 VR, rumors of like an Apple VR AR experience. So I think it's just going to continue to grow, and probably a lot this year though.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we've looked at it for one of our jewelry clients. So, through the technology, whether it's the camera on your phone or on your computer, you can see what the earrings look like on you. You could hold your wrist up and it'll put the bracelet on, or a ring on your finger. So, some of that is really interesting, but it is going to be still vertical specific, similar to the metaverse answer I just gave. And right now it's really expensive also. So it's a little bit cost prohibitive. To just look at it from an ad unit perspective, it's probably cost prohibitive. If it's going to be used to power your site and there's a broader investment in it cross channel, then it may make sense. But I think with more growth, the cost will come down and it'll be more affordable for different brands.
Great, thank you. And I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, feel free to enter it in the Q&A feature here on Zoom. So that way, at the end of the conversation, we'll go ahead and answer those questions with the group here. Okay, next, with live streaming and video on social seeing wider adoption, how can marketers leverage these tools effectively and stand out from the competition?
I can jump in on this one again. I think live streaming and video are, especially on social, are increasingly valuable. They cost a lot less than highly produced marketing videos. They come off as more native. So I think leaning into some of these ad placements or tools or formats, I think, is a really great way to break through and reach your audiences in a very meaningful way. And like I mentioned before, when these new things come out, lean in, strike while the iron's hot, and you can do it with very little. Just find good lighting and make sure everyone can hear you, and you don't have to pay for talent for an ad. You can accomplish almost as much with very simple creators.
Yeah, and I think it also makes a brand feel real, right? Like it's a real social connection. It's not like an advertisement, and it's it's a reel from you've got reels from your friends and your other connections, and then there's a reel from a brand that's relevant for you. So it kind of fits in that environment, and there's a reason why you connected with that brand on social media, and it kind of makes it feel like a friend versus a brand.
There's a lot of it lately with people just using everyday regular people, not even just in radio commercials or social, but on TV as well. I've heard a lot of people talking about it. They're like, it gets them to stop and notice it because they otherwise would be expecting just a commercial. But I think it helps break through quite a bit.
Great, thank you. Next question here. How important do you expect influencer relationships to be this year?
I mean, I can jump in on this one again because it's very related. I think more and more people are going to be using those influencers, particularly like mid-sized influencers, because you get that very native feel, but especially on social where people are scrolling through their feeds, they're not expecting to see overly produced marketing messages. And in a lot of cases, they're just going to swipe by. But if there's content being created by an influencer that seems very relevant, maybe one that you follow, or that just seems like a normal person, you're going to get a lot more feed stopping power than you would otherwise. So I think there will probably be an increase in some of the more smaller mid-cap influencer relationships.
Yeah, I think influencers are a great way to go. I think one of the challenges is how do you value it, right? And how do you put a price tag on it, and are you paying the right amount? And that's where somebody like Keith and our social team here at AUDIENCEX can help understand what the reach is going to be, what some of those things look like, right? Because look, everybody's a content creator now. Everybody's got some kind of a following, and with the marketplaces that are evolving within some of the tools to help you connect with all these influencers, it's just a question of what are you going to get for the price you're going to pay, and is the return going to be there?
Actually, with you mentioning tools too, Stephen, just even to emphasize how much this probably is going to continue to grow, a lot of the social platforms now offer like creative marketplaces and ways within a platform that you can reach content creators that design specifically for that platform, right within the ads platform. So I think the barrier to entry is becoming lower and lower. The need to source and deal with influencers in terms of negotiations, I think is becoming a little bit less, so that smaller and mid-sized businesses can really get their feet in.
Great, thank you. Next question. This is probably surrounding social here too. Can you talk a little bit about how interactive content can help marketers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps drive resonance. I think it gives a prospective customer a chance to experience or engage with the brand. And when they do that, they're far more likely to remember or relate to it in some way. So you're going to drive up awareness, drive up consideration. It's not always going to be the point of connecting with a customer online that they're ready to purchase. So it's important that if and when they are ready to take action, that your brand can be top of mind. And the more unique ways that you can interact or engage with those customers, I think it will really help just basically elevate everything across the board. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy either. Even on social, you could lean into very low level engagement tactics like using polls on Instagram or on Twitter, follower prompts, asking them to respond or provide more information like sliding scales, games. There's a lot of very easy ways to engage and get potential customers to connect with your brand without even making it that obvious that that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's a great way to do some first party research. Collect the poll responses like we're doing here, right? We're asking some questions and collecting that information. So it's kind of a nice way to cheat.
Great, thank you. And we have time for one more question before we jump into our Q&A. How can brands and agencies remain adaptable to evolving trends and tactics?
I'd say the listeners on the call are doing it right now, right? Follow industry news, attend webinars. I would also say be open to experimentation if the budget's there. I know I previously said less people are going to be experimenting this year, but like I mentioned, contextual. If you haven't tried it, look into it, talk with experts about it, at least prepare yourself so that when you do have the budget for experimentation, that you're prepared for what you want to do. And then I'll always say data in probably every answer I give. So collect data, use analytics to measure your data and your results and make adjustments as needed.
I'd say brands specifically, they're going to be the most adaptable to evolving trends and tactics when they know what those trends and tactics are or have been exposed to them. So I like to generally recommend dedicate a portion of time to openly exploring what other people or brands that you're following on channels, whether it be on social or outside of social, to see what they're doing. And it sounds sometimes like a guilty pleasure, but taking a step outside of your business bubble can really be helpful in discovering like new tactics or strategies that could be applicable to your brand. And it doesn't have to be limited either to people within your vertical. I think sometimes the best ideas can sometimes come from totally different types of businesses, or even just individuals in general, and trying to think of how you could apply those tactics to your brand. And it just leads to opportunities where you could really be a leader in your vertical, doing or testing something new.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that. I don't think that there's a magic formula for 2023 that's different than what's existed in the past. It's being curious, it's understanding what's out there in terms of evolving trends and tactics. It's as we've been saying throughout, recognizing what's real, recognizing what's hype, recognizing what's relevant for your business, for your category, and then choosing to make your investment in those areas that you think are going to have the biggest bang for the buck. Right? Some things might be cool and interesting, but not really relevant for who you are as a brand or what your vertical is. So those are the things that you can watch from the outside and kind of wait until they evolve a little bit more to be more relevant for you. But try to jump on the ones that are right for you, and keep an eye on what the others are doing. We had a client who was somewhat conservative. Years ago, we used to joke that they never wanted to be first, but they wanted to be a really close second. So, it's not a horrible strategy to deploy, but, try and be first sometimes also.
And I'll mention one other thing in addition to the webinars. I forgot to even mention this, but we also have a LinkedIn group specifically around the webinar topics that we have. So any questions that come up after this, we'll send a link with the follow-up email after the webinar. But that's also a great place you could go if you're not familiar or you don't have anybody that you could ask or a resource that you could ask questions about some of these new trends and tactics. That's a great place to open that up, because we're all working in the same industry, or relatively within the same industry and with the same tools. So it's a great place to connect with other people that might have the same questions or might have a good answer.
Great, thank you, everyone. So let's go ahead and dive into the poll questions and results here. So I'll just go through each one and then get your thoughts on it. So the first question that we had was, what are your around surrounding budget? So what are your expectations for the budget this year? So 40, the highest is 44% said increase in ad spend. Second was not 32% with not yet certain. Then close third and fourth is 15% have said that spend will stay the same, while 10% said that ad spend will decrease. So the question here, is this something in line what you're seeing as well across the channels that you guys are all working on and helping clients with?
I think it's pretty consistent. I think seeing not yet certain at 32% is pretty accurate. It's good to see increased ad spend. I mean, there's so many studies that have been done throughout the years that the brands that maintain and increase their share of voice through tough economic times is the one that emerged the quickest. They stay top of mind. So it's good to see that, over 70%, are not looking at immediate budget reduction. So actually 90%, there's only 10% that said they're going to decrease. So I think that's good to see.
Yeah, and I would say for those 44 on the increased ad spend, it sounds like you guys are ready for experimentation. So start throwing some new things in there.
Great, yeah, and I can tell, just from my in-house marketing budget, we do have an increase in ad spend, and we go quarter by quarter, evaluating how things can shift, and then we go from there. Okay, let's go through the next question here. What tactics are you currently using to collect zero-party and first-party data? So first was at 48% with first-party cookies, and then second was other tactics, followed closely by social media polls or conversations, incentivizations, quizzes, polls, or surveys. So those are about 23 to 26%. So any
nice to see a lot of people using our first party data. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I mean, it does seem like a lot of folks here are using different tactics, so that's good to see. In first party cookie, it does make sense that it's higher up there. I think more people talk about it and have adopted it in the industry. So Any other thoughts there before we jump over to the next one? Yep. Okay. Last one here is around programmatic. So how do you currently advertise programmatically? We know the benefits of programmatic. So, with that, the top choice here was 59% through a managing agency or partner. Second is not currently doing advertising programmatically at about 28%, and then followed in the under 10% of self-service through an independent platform and directly on an enterprise platform last.
Yeah, be curious to hear from the 28% why you're not currently advertising programmatically. What are you doing in its place, and where are you struggling to see the value? Because we can definitely help with that.
Yeah, and I would say, and of course, I think Brittany, you'd probably say that, from those that are not doing programmatic advertising themselves, there are multiple solutions there. You can go through an agency partner or you can do it in-house with self-service, or you can do a hybrid model. So there are a lot of different choices, but the idea there is you do want to start that journey. And so if you do have any questions, you can always feel free to connect with any of us as well, and we can help provide some guides and insights on how to get that started.
Yeah, I would just say if it's lack of first-party data that's holding anybody back, that shouldn't be a barrier. So there's lots of alternatives to first-party data that can be really effective.
Great, thank you. So we'll go ahead and jump to our audience questions here. The first one here is, and I'll go ahead and just read it. What do you think about zero-party data audiences used in programmatic advertising as an alternative to the third-party providers?
I mean, I'm not coming from programmatic, obviously, but I think with regard to zero-party data, I think it really depends on your business and what zero-party data partner you're able to connect with or work with, because it's really going to entirely depend on what audiences they have available. Like one, for example, I know is a finance tool similar to Mint, where users will submit their information for free use of like budgeting tools and things like that. In those cases, you're going to get usually a younger subset of users, ones that are on a lower income level. So that could be great for some businesses, but in other cases, it may not. So I think it entirely depends on what that zero-party data partner is, and whether or not you can find and reach those users that are relevant to your business that way. Otherwise, I mean, you're always going to get a ton, usually a lot of scale with third-party data partners, but it's going to be a little bit different.
And I would say if you have access to zero-party data and you're curious, which one should I be using, test it, do an A/B test, see what works for you, because it's going to be different for every brand.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. You can if you do have it, you can run zero-party with these third-party providers and test it. You can throw in first-party data. There are definitely a lot of different techniques or strategies that can be implemented. And the best obviously is to test it out and go from there.
And actually, one other thing that I don't think was touched upon was zero-party data. Something that you do get from zero-party data that you don't normally get from third-party data, you can get a lot more information, sometimes even transaction level data that users are submitting, either connecting to credit cards or bank accounts. So you can get a lot of really granular visibility with zero-party data that you wouldn't otherwise get with third-party. But again, it fully depends on whether or not the audiences they have available are ones that are relevant for your brand.
Perfect. So next question here is surrounding privacy. So beyond privacy policies / increased transparency, is it on the DSPs to ensure that they are compliant with the unfolding data privacy laws? And then a follow-up is, how can we assure clients that their buy is safe?
It's a good question. I don't know the legal answer if it's up to the DSP to ensure they're compliant with data privacy laws. In terms of targeting cookies, right, that's what DSPs allow us to do. They allow us to buy audiences and match audiences with inventory. right? If those cookies are out there, they're just kind of the middleman. So from a legal standpoint, I can't really answer that, Brittany. I don't know if you know a little bit more on the technical side, but it's really up to the agency and the advertiser to ensure that the data sets that they're targeting are compliant, that you've got a privacy policy on your site that covers you in the way that you're going to collect data and the way that you're going to use data. So, I think all of those kind of swim lanes are getting a little bit blurry, but, from a brand standpoint, certainly inventory, that's something that's controllable. And then, your site privacy policy, I think, covers a lot of that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, anyone that touches PII is going to be held responsible, right? So yes, the DSPs need to make sure that they are compliant in terms of the data that they are seeing and they are touching. But to Stephen's point, it's also very much about the brands. You need to make sure that if you are collecting first-party data in any way or form, that you are doing it legally responsibly.
Great, thank you. So that brings us to the end. And with that, I just want to thank you, Stephen, Brittany, and Keith for participating. And thank you everyone for attending today's session. We'll be sending out a recording of this webinar to all registrants afterwards, so everyone can look out for that soon. If you have any questions, feel free to connect with any of us on social media. And like I said, we'll follow up with an email with the recording, but also a link to our social group for any further questions.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.